Obbies are one of Roblox's biggest genres, and on the surface, they appear to be a light challenge for any unamused player, but once you look a little deeper, the true difficulty of these games slowly begin to appear. From seemingly impossible obbies that were found to be possible, all the way to obbies that couldn't be beaten in millions of years, the very definition of impossible seems to get warped throughout time. And to see just how, I present to you the complete history of Roblox's impossible obbies. Cue the intro. But before we start the video, please consider subscribing to the channel, as we are trying to hit 20,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I know it's just the click of a button, but it goes a long way. Thanks. Welcome to the Impossible Obby, 35 stages of progressively harder gameplay, and in 2019, this was considered impossible by most. Why? Well, as it turns out, most of the obby is actually easy, but stage 35, the finale, is much harder than the rest. For over a month, countless players attempted to complete the finale, but none succeeded. That was until August of 2019, where a player named Undistant tried their hand in this obby. They quickly progressed through the main 34 stages, until they reached the finale. To no surprise, they were met with the same roadblock all the other players had stopped at before. But Undistant wasn't an ordinary player. They were the victor of some of the hardest Flood Escape 2 maps, a popular obby game at the time, meaning that in 2019, they were well within the top 1% of hobbyists on the platform. So with this, along with ludicrous amounts of determination, they became the first victor of the Impossible Obby a month after release, making the title of the game seem not so true. But come on, that one was really easy. We gotta move forward in time. It's now late 2019, and a new, physically impossible obby was about to be finished. This was the Citadel of Void, 22 floors of luck-based, impossible, and punishing gameplay that is nowhere near possible for a human to complete. For some perspective, here's some gameplay on floor 17. Mind you, this is over something that instantly kills you, and over an hour into the Citadel with gameplay such as this. Comparing this to the Impossible Obby is literally like comparing a coughing baby to a hydrogen bomb. But even with this impossible status being clearly defined in the obbying scene, some obbyists still somehow dare to attempt it. One of these obbies that tried to defy the impossible was a player you may know by the name of Skitsuna. Soon after the release of this obby, he tried his best at it, but it's safe to say that he came nowhere close to even reaching the second floor of the obby. Fast forward to 2023, and now he's the best obbyist in the world. With the hardest possible obbies at the time under his belt, like the Tower of Eternal Void, he was really the only player crazy enough to properly attempt this, and on June 12th of that year, he did the seemingly impossible, making it all the way to the second floor of the Citadel. It was undeniably the world record, and at the time, many players thought it was the furthest anyone could get. Little did they know, Skitsuna was about to absolutely demolish their expectations. Let's move forward again to 2024. With an even better Skitsuna attempting the Citadel, things were about to get good. Surprisingly quickly, he managed to make it to the third floor of the Citadel, but he wasn't home free yet. You see, this floor is under a timer, and while it's not the tightest, it still manages to put pressure on the player. And with its absurd jumps like this extremely tight stick out, things weren't looking good. Skitsuna still prevailed though, and after many fails finally got to floor 4. And guess what? This was the easiest floor before his goal of floor 5 by far, so he should make it past in at least the next attempt he gets there, right? Nope. Skitsuna failed the floor 10 entire times due to overthinking, but when he made it to 5, he went crazy. This was it, Skitsuna's final goal. Due to 5's practically impossible difficulty, there was no way he would try to continue, but that's what everyone thought. It's now 2025, and progress on the Citadel had been dormant for almost a year. Skit really had been satisfied. That wasn't until the spark. As a little side quest, he had verified floor 5 of COV as an individual segment, but this created a thought in his mind. What if he really could pass it in a real run? Most of 5's difficulty is from muscle memory because of wall hops, so how bad could it be? To put it short, bad. After regaining his consistency, he slowly made progress through the floor with each attempt, eventually passing his old personal best. That was until he was met with the final challenge of the floor, the wall hop spam. It's over the void, meaning one misstep and your run is over. Let's see how he does. Yeah, that isn't a good sign. Thankfully though, he eventually made it back, this time making it much further in, but he still couldn't pass his final roadblock. By some miracle though, the very same day, he had done the impossible. Skitsuna was now on floor 6, and thankfully it's the easiest floor. To nobody's surprise, he passed it, and was now staring down the floor that would hold his world record, floor 7. But how far could Skitsuna make it? And with that fail, it marks the end of the story of Citadel of Void, with the player truly redefining what impossible means. And you know what? Maybe more progress will be made in the near future. I guess we'll have to see. On to 2020. We're now in the year of the pandemic, but also the year of one of Roblox's most famous hobbyists, Con 2005. And on May 17th of 2020, he had finally finished building his magnum opus. This was none other than the Stairway to Heaven, one of this genre's most recognizable, and in 2020, Impossible Obbies. Throughout the years, it slowly became one of, if not the most infamous obby on the platform, growing its reputation of being just out of the realm of possibility. But one Unreal obbyist said, nah, I'm beating this. And on August 9th, all the way in 2024, the player monster as a block let everyone know with his world record progress video, making it about 2/3 way into the obby. Even in 2024, when Skit was making it to 5 in Citadel of Void, this was unheard for Stairway to Heaven, and in Obbies as a whole. But Block didn't stop there. The very same day, he posted a video called Stairway to Heaven status with this ridiculous fail. The craziest part about this though, is somehow the description. It read, "Could have unironically beaten it if I didn't fail to this, by the way." And he was right, because at that moment, he was just 3 minutes away from victory. In the simplest terms, it was plain unlucky. But Block was determined to prove this was possible, so he kept throwing attempts at the obby until a very fateful day, August 28. It was an ordinary session, most runs ending prematurely, some making it further, and just one made it exceptionally far. Passed his first world record, passed his second, and then he was facing the finale. Just over a minute of gameplay. What could make it so hard? Look down. There's absolutely nothing to save you if you fall, and with nerves, this simple minute of gameplay becomes a torturous mind game, with one mistake leading to hours of progress gone. But still, Block defied the odds. He destroyed the finale, and was already at the final jump. History was about to be made. He had fallen on the final jump of this obby. He plunged into the void, and was back to where it all started again. This was utterly devastating, and what happened next is exactly 5 times worse, because he would go on to fail the final jump 5 times in a row, until he just couldn't take it anymore. The obby claimed yet another victim, and its title as the undefeated obby had stayed. Weeks, months, nearly a year passed with no sign of anyone coming close to verifying this obby, until suddenly, a post? Wait, there's no way. This suddenly got verified without a single progress video? Yes, that is exactly the case. The player that was able to complete this was Boom Sasuk, the #1 obbyist back then and still now. Let's see what led up to this very moment. All the way back in February of 2024, months before Block ever posted his world record, Boom had apparently made it over halfway through the obby, but something was wrong. His interest in obbies was slowly declining, and although he was motivated, he played less and less, but still had the ability to get to the finale multiple times, all failing. He soon gave up, until his friends made this happen with something as simple as a bet. You see, Boom believed this was easier than his hardest, back there Benjamin, and his friend said if he could verify this in under a week, he would be right about the whole thing. That was 2 days before that post dropped. Yeah, Boom is honestly not human, and he proved that by not just making progress in an impossible obby, but beating it, proving a years-long belief about the obby completely wrong. And oh yeah, you know Block? He would end up being the first victor after Boom almost 8 months later, so this obby has a happy ending. Welcome to the Tower of Spiraling Fates. Over 30 minutes of some of Roblox's most advanced gameplay, and at the time, it sat at peak Unreal difficulty on the difficulty chart, which was believed to be the human limit for obbying at the time. For a long while, the best players attempting this obby could barely get past its first floor, but if we move forward in time, 2 very familiar faces appear. The first, Skitsuna. He began trying to get some decent progress on this tower soon after his floor 5 world record on Citadel of Void from earlier. Skit made his debut with his floor 5 progress on Spiraling Fates nearing the end of August 23rd, 2024. Symbolic, right? Well, just a couple weeks after he made it to the near end of floor 6, and because of just how hard this obby was thought to be, people genuinely thought it was a joke that he was grinding it. But this little dip into TOSF would soon become a serious commitment, when our unlucky Stairway to Heaven grinder showed the world his brand new world record on TOSF just 4 days after Skitsuna, with an attempt to reaching floor 7. With this, the race between Skitsuna and Block to verify this evidently impossible obby would begin. Skitsuna quickly struck back against Block though, reaching the end of 7 just 3 days later. He continued his lead by making it to 8 6 days after that. For some perspective on how close they were to beating this, floor 10 is completely netted, meaning that if you get there, you will win. But to get to 10, you must pass 9, and 9 is by far the hardest floor of Spiraling Fates. With an outside and compact inside section full of gameplay, it meant that the grind was just starting. And just a day after his 8 run, he had made it there, now having an entire 2 floor lead on Block. But Block was preparing, and on October 13th, just 5 days after Skit's 9 run, he closed the gap in the race. In fact, he was now ahead, making it about a third of the way through. Things were extremely close now, but once again, Skitsuna had a comeback, doubling Block's progress on 9 by failing just before the final inside of the floor. With Block getting more 9 runs, slowly getting through the floor, things were about to get wild. On October 20th, Skitsuna posted a devastating fail. 4 jumps away from victory. Things could simply not get any worse for Skitsuna. 5 days later, he failed the jump right after, sealing his fate and allowing Block to verify the entire tower out of nowhere just a day after this fail. It was a complete tragedy, and in the end, Block was the winner of this race. Don't worry though, Skitsuna would eventually end up being its 4th victor, proving that Tower of Spiraling Fates was nowhere near the human limit, and it now sits at the 4th hardest tower ever beaten on Roblox. IKEA, one of the biggest furniture brands in the world, and also the face of one of Roblox's most notorious obbies? Yes, actually. The latter part of that sentence became true in 2022 when IKEA Tower was released. It sat at the nil difficulty, meaning the level of skill required to beat this would be beyond human abilities. So how hard do you think it really was? Well, that would be answered in the year 2024, just over 2 after its release. This story is very similar to the others, so I'll try to keep it short, but for the 3rd time in a row, Block would be the one to challenge this. He really is becoming the main character of this video, isn't he? Well, on the first day of May in 2024, he made his first progress on the tower with the floor 7 run into an apparent nil. Even though 10 was the hardest part of this, it did prove that the tower could be done by humans, but to everyone's surprise, just a few days later, he had fully verified it. But not quite. It turns out that he didn't start recording until later in the run, meaning it was not considered a legit completion, and he would have to rebeat the entire thing while recording to prove this obby is possible. Long story short, it severely set him back, but he would eventually verify IKEA Tower after months of grinding, and it was placed at peak horrific, just below the unreal difficulty. These obbies are really proving to be easier than we thought, right? Wrong. This is the Tower of Void, the first 10 floors of the aforementioned Citadel of Void, nerfed to be barely just humanly possible. In fact, the difficulty of it, peak unreal, is believed even now to be the limit of Roblox obbying. Oh yeah, by the way, it's now already 2025, and our favorite Citadel of Void grinder wanted to try this out for fun after getting their floor 5 world record. This was, of course, Skitsuna, but quite quickly, something spectacular happened. You see, Tower of Void shares very similar gameplay to Citadel of Void, meaning that if you've grinded the Citadel for hours like Skit, it practically gives you the same muscle memory for the tower. This meant that in just his first attempt, he made it to floor 4, and within a couple more, he made it back to 4 again. But this time, he didn't stop at 4, he made it to 5, then to floor 6, and finally arrived at 7. Just like his Citadel of Void grind, he didn't make it past, but in his Tower of Void run, he made it very close to 8. At the time, the community was already floored by this record, and the story of this tower seemed as it was coming to a close. But then, a new challenger appeared. This player was none other than Exexic, one of the two players who beat Roblox's hardest obby while I was writing the script, the Tower of Whalcore. For some representation on just how hard Tower of Void was, Whalcore was mid-unreal, miles easier than the peak unreal difficulty of Tower of Void. Just like Skitsuna, he had history with Citadel of Void, with a personal best of 5 end, but in his case, he was fresh off a top 1 completion at the time. Because of this, he had a very similar experience, easily getting past the infamous floor 5. This allowed Exexic to reach floor 7, and instead of failing, he prevailed. Welcome to floor 9. Tower of Void's hardest floor. With insta-kill bricks, low roof wall hops, and even wall walks, it is almost impossible to do this floor legitimately on its own, let alone passing it in a real run. So when Exexic reached it, he was satisfied, expecting to get nowhere far in the floor. Long story short, he was completely wrong. Starting with passing the hardest jump in the tower, the beat block wall hop, Exexic slowly made progress to the near impossible floor. Then, he passed the extremely precise low roof wall hops, which led him to the outside. This floor is near end, but unfortunately, as he jumped for the gap in the frame, he mistimed his wall hop, sending him back down to 8, where he couldn't make it back. This run though, as Exexic himself described, was nothing short of a miracle, and overall is the second hardest thing done in Roblox Obbies today. And that is the true end to what players have done in this tower, pushing their limits in a potentially humanly impossible tower with what they could do. But enough with obbies we actually have a chance of doing. It's time for something harder than the Citadel of Void. Welcome to True Impossibility. 2 hours of some of the hardest jumps ever made on Roblox, and it sits almost a whole difficulty above Citadel of Void, being in fact hundreds of times harder than it. It took over 2 years to build, and over 10,000 minutes to make a showcase of. It is safe to say it easily dethrones the Citadel of Void as the hardest high quality obby on Roblox. To show how hard this is, let's use something called all jumping. Simply, this is where you can place checkpoints anywhere in the obby and try to beat it. So if I'm on this jump and fail it while in all jump mode, I can go straight back to the start of it if I have a checkpoint placed there. Obviously, this removes the entire punishment factor of these obbies as a whole, which is one of the largest factors in determining the difficulty of an obby. So, if you're able to place a checkpoint anywhere in the obby, how hard do you think it is? Well, it turns out that an all jump at this tower is equivalent to beating IKEA Tower legit, or almost unreal difficulty. Just comprehending the pure difficulty of this is a challenge for even the best hobbyists, and it really shows just how hard Roblox obbies can get. But with that, we have made it to the present day, and whilst there isn't much more to talk about these impossible obbies, their story is nowhere over. The obby community is only getting larger with each passing day, and who knows, maybe something like Tower of Void will be beaten in the near future by an obbying prodigy. But until then, we can only wonder, and appreciate the community on how far it's come. From struggling on the impossible obby, to triumphing over the Stairway to Heaven, and building towers far beyond our comprehension, nothing is really off the table. And as Alexander the Great said, nothing is impossible to him who will try. Thank you.